Hey, so let's talk about self-esteem and how to create it now instead of chasing it in the future. And this has so much to do with our inner sense of self-worth. In fact, self-worth and self-esteem are often used interchangeably. There's so much to do with how we identify with our work lives and so much to do with being a woman and our female conditioning, as you will see. Why is self-esteem so important? Well, it's about getting the right motivation to achieve what you want in life. And in that sense, it's like if you're chasing self-esteem, if you're believing that self-esteem is something that needs to be earned or accomplished, then to some extent, you're doing everything from a place of fear and anxiety of your not enoughness. And I can speak to this personally so much as somebody who, was a grade A student at school, somewhat unpopular, a little weird. And in the absence of that sense of belonging, started to try and change external things. For me, it was my body. For me, that's when I tried to get really skinny and became a binge eater. But equally, I was already primed for that by pinning all of my good feelings about myself on the affirmation that I was getting from my teachers, the grades and the positive regard from my teachers. So if you will know that your self-esteem is a little bit of an issue if you are doing a lot of people pleasing, if you find yourself striving a lot in your life and being incredibly future focused, if you feel like your to-do list is running you and you're having a lot of scarcity issues, like not enough time, not enough money, the chances are this all stems back to a sense of not enoughness in yourself in the first place. And let me show you a little bit how this works in terms of how this is a sort of psychological pattern that plays out. And I want to suggest to you that focusing on self-improvement, and this is kind of ironic from me because I'm a life coach and a weight loss coach. And so I work in the self-development field, and in the self-help field, I teach people to self-coach. So, it's really crucial to understand that all of our effort to self-improve is possibly a bit of chasing a rainbow, as we will see. Now, you will know that as a weight loss life coach, a lot of the places that I've encountered self-esteem are in terms of people's body image, in terms of people's sense of whether they are worthy of self-care. And often this is very, very linked to the work that we do, trying to be successful, trying to make money, have an impact, get recognition and status. Sometimes we're looking for external signs of our worthiness in other places. It can be money, it can be this, like who we know and the social circles we move in. It can be achievements, like, yay, I ran a marathon. And that's why I've included weight on that triangle, because often people that I work with are spending their whole lives trying to lose weight or be their perfect weight, like a project in its own right, trying to fix their body in order to feel that they are okay, in order to feel that they are worthy. And worthiness is feeling like I'm okay. It's feeling like I am of value. And that's the difference between self-worth and self-confidence. Self-confidence is your belief in your ability to do things. I'm confident that I can give a presentation. I'm confident that I can feed my children. Whereas self-esteem is about confidence in your intrinsic value as a human being. So if you're anything like me, you end up in this kind of a pattern. And this is why chasing self-esteem doesn't necessarily feel depressing. Isn't that interesting? It all starts with a sense of being not okay. Now, that might be in the world of feeling like your body's not okay, or it might be that you feel like you need to do something in order to be good. Like, I might tell myself I don't make enough money to consider myself successful, or I might tell myself I'm not on top of my cleaning, like I'm disorganized. Like last year I let the car go out of MOT. That's the tax you have to have on the car, and I didn't notice. It was due in October. I didn't notice till February. I might think I'm so disorganized. I'm hardly there. I might say I'm not a good enough parent. Like, my kids argue viciously. I worry that maybe they'll hate each other when they grow up. And sometimes I yell, and once I stuck my head in the saucepan cupboard and screamed, I might have all these things that I feel like, these moments when I think, oh God, MOT moment, screaming in the cupboard moment. You're like, oh God, this has got to stop. I have got to change something about myself. And then what generally happens to me is that I get looking for solutions. I go online, I'm reading other self-help stuff, I'm reading other coaches, or you might, if your goal is money, I might be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do in my business. And I get fired up. Yeah. And that phase, and if it's with weight, this shows itself really as the new diet as well. Like, I'll get a plan, I'll get an app, I'll get a new thing, and I'll get all enthusiastic about that. And that phase is full of creativity, actually, and hope and learning and enthusiasm. And it feels very positive. Like, yeah, I'm making progress. I'm going to change something about me. And there's energy and there's willing effort there. But over the course of time, when you're striving, nothing you do is enough. And so you start to make sacrifices, and you start to feel like you don't have enough time to make all the improvements that you can dream of. And you start to make those sacrifices and think that it's worth it. It's worth overworking right now, because later on I'll be making more money and then I'll enjoy my life. Or it's worth let me think of another example. Yeah, it's worth spending a lot more time on trying to improve my body right now, because then I'll get to the body I want. I just have to go without the things I like now, and then later on I'll have the body I want. So it's all very kind of self-punishing. It becomes self-punishing. It becomes duty. It becomes more work that we've given ourselves. And this is how self-improvement can become a kind of desperate pedal to try to get up the hill, a desperate attempt to try and get out of our own perceived deficit. And in that space, we're feeling very impatient. Things aren't happening fast enough, and we're feeling very determined. We're really going to see it through, and stoical and dutiful, or maybe even just robotic, like just really like doing what has to be done, maybe even sad. And it's so tiring because we're powering through self-doubt. And it's all based on that idea of this rainbow that keeps moving, because really we haven't really defined usually what being good enough is. We haven't said, oh, this is what it means to be a good enough mother, or this is what it means to be a good enough person at my job. We're just hoping that somebody else will give us some signs that we're good enough. And this idea that when I'm better, I can enjoy my life. This fantasy, like when I'm 100% in control of my food, then I can relax. Right now, I've got to work on myself all the time. Or when I've built my business, I can have fun and I feel worthy then. We're looking for success. We're chasing recognition, and we're not giving ourselves acknowledgement of our success, and we're not recognizing ourselves in the process. And the problems associated with this are like, trying to get through your days instead of actually living it, and being really exhausted because you're constantly trying to be something. And you might notice that you are very frustrated if you don't get external hits of, gratitude from people for the efforts that you make, or acknowledgement. You might notice that you're people pleasing and trying really hard to attain results. You might notice your relationships suffer. I mean, my goodness, my husband really knows what it's like when I go into a bubble that feels very creative, but it's also me striving. And he knows to wait for me. But I also am really aware that relationships don't wait forever, and that that it's happening now. And the fantasy that life will be better later is just that, is a fantasy, because it doesn't. It's 50-50 now. It will be 50-50 later. I am 50-50 now, virtues and flaws, and I will be 50-50 later too. And this is it. It doesn't get better than this. This day is the happiness that I have, and it's really going to be about sinking in and appreciating it as I go, and not racing through it. I also notice that when I'm living a lot like this, there's constant, what I would name as fear, but I would say it's also like, maybe just shows up in slight unease, actually, and slight anxiety, like trying to get away from myself, that insecurity, feeling like I'm racing all day, and then getting into bed and feeling like I didn't do half the things I wanted to do, that I'd set myself, feeling that scarcity, that insufficiency that I mentioned earlier, just feeling like I'm not enough and I don't have enough time. That's where it shows up a lot for me. Like, I don't have enough time to accomplish the things that would make me okay, that I need to do. And I need to do them because I've imposed them upon myself, because I have self-expectations, and those self-expectations are there purely because I have a deficit of self-esteem. Also the unease around past failures, like bringing them with us. And I'm going to mention that again when I talk about the human brain in a minute. There's this quote, and this really struck me. This is from the eating psychology realm, and this was a quote from a woman who was on a retreat, and Janine Roth describes it in her book Women, Food and God, which is such a wonderful book. I totally recommend it. Not that it's strictly speaking relevant to self-esteem, it's just everybody should read it. She said she's talking about how her struggle with food has become a lifelong project, and that on the retreat she realizes, I feel as if I need to find out what I'm doing for self-expression and what I'm doing for self-improvement. Like, when do we get to express ourselves as we are now, and not just try and become a better version of ourselves, not trying to fix what's not good enough? So why are we all trying so hard to improve ourselves? Well, we did some brainstorming in a mastermind session, and people hit on a lot of really good stuff. Firstly, they brought up capitalism and how all of these deficits, of course, can be filled by a market. Of course, then you need to buy another parenting book. Then you need to buy some more education. Whatever is not yet there about you try and fill. I mentioned the human brain, and that's just really interesting to notice how our brain is wired to protect us. And it uses the past as a reference point to try and predict the future. So any past failures that you have will feature very heavily in your consciousness. That's just how we're made. We're made to look for problems, right? And so we make a lot of effort to try not to fail again. And a lot of what we do is to try and assure ourselves that we will have in our mythical future to be failure proof. But actually, this is a lie that we're telling ourselves, because actually being failure proof is being willing to experience failure and not let it damage your self-worth. Being failure proof is not never failing again by achieving so robustly, by being so skilled. Yeah. I think you know this already. I'm just kind of drawing these things to your attention. I talk about education before I talk about female conditioning, and that's because the psychological theories around self-worth are based in educational psychology. The big one is Covington's self-worth theory. That was based on a study that Covington and Beery did in 1976 of school children. And they were trying to figure out how school children got their self-worth. And even at that age, what they were finding was that there are three components upon which children base their self-worth. They assess their own ability, and of course they do so competitively. They assess their own performance, and of course they do so competitively. And they assess their own effort. Now notice that nowhere there is anybody talking about an intrinsic sense of being fine, right? And nobody's talking about their personality or who they are or how they deal with the world emotionally. And the word effort is the one that really strikes home, because as long as we feel like we've got to do something to earn this self-worth, we are screwed for sure. Now, I was just looking at a study yesterday about girls. The study was done at Cardiff University, and it was looking at the gender difference between girls and boys at school. And what it was finding was that even though girls perform better academically, always, they score much lower on metrics of happiness at school. So they're already, even as schoolgirls, rating themselves very low on a score that asks them whether teachers know them well. That indicates to me that they're putting on a bit of a performance, that they're trying to be somebody. They have very high scores of feeling like they don't belong at school. That consciousness, that comparisonitis, already there. And very high scores of feeling worried. I think there's a self-consciousness that goes with female conditioning, and a sense of having to, put in extra hours in order to put in so many extra hours and over-deliver, like conditioned to over-deliver extra homework, extra preparation in order to reach parity. And I think that comes in on a very unconscious level early on, and it carries through. so that we believe that it's by making our maximum effort and doing our best that we will be rewarded. And that goes along with this idea of capitalism, that the kind of capitalism that we are immersed in is a kind of the notion of a meritocracy. But a meritocracy is the meritocracy is imperfect, because the promise of meritocracy, of course, is, the better you are at something and the harder you work, the more you'll be rewarded. Although in reality, all kinds of things are rewarded, like through, celebrity culture, through nepotism, through gender gaps and other biases that actually make that meritocracy not a straight mathematical equation. And yet we're conditioned to believe that it's our effort that is the thing that pays off. And actually the effort is the part that's under our control. And I think that's why we make such a try hard effort. Of course, I also have culture and parenting in here. We mentioned, like, in the masterclass, people from different countries of origin, and different countries have a different work culture. America has a different culture around taking time off, around maternity leave, and so on. And parenting, it's interesting because I think, traditional psychotherapy would attribute a lot of our sense of self-worth to our attachment to our mothers. I actually think it's just one factor, and I also wonder whether we as humans, whether every human has that thought, I'm not good enough, regardless of whether your parents did affirm you or not affirm you. But it is interesting to reflect on whether you had at some point in your memory a sense of being good, a sense of being a good person. And that kind of brings me to think back to maybe your experience of holding a baby. Now, this might not be the case for everybody, but I definitely don't have much experience of unconditional love for myself. But I did, holding my children, feel very clear that you are just good. You are just good. And of course, as some people mentioned, the expectations come in. Oh, my baby screams too much. Oh, my baby's colicky. Oh, my baby doesn't sleep when I want them to. The expectations do come in, but that sense of them as just life. They just have life, and that value that we have is in the fact that we're alive. And the fact that we're unique. And that when you are alive, in every moment, you're part of something unfolding. You're witness to things, you are having an influence, you're creating a ripple effect, you're contributing some of yourself, you're bringing your energy, you're bringing your perception. And all of that is unique. And we see that in our friends, like, oh, Sarah, she's just so Sarah. That's so her. And yet she doesn't see that about themselves. I don't see, like, I'm so Laura. I don't go around going, I'm so Laura. It's so great being Laura. And yet, really, that is that is my opportunity to be telling myself that I'm amazing. Or even just, I'm here today and I'm human. Sometimes we gloss over mindfulness, or we take it as we take it as something we acknowledge intellectually and we don't actually live. But I do not think that there is a greater wisdom than that this moment is the one that's available to you, and this moment is where your power is, and this moment is where you get to feel your emotions and experience your humanity and open your senses to everything that's going on. You are unique, and you can choose to accept this moment and to accept yourself in it. And that self-acceptance is going to take a deliberate decision. It's not just going to arrive like, oh, I'm cool with myself right now. Going to have to be like, yeah, I commit to this time. this moment with myself. I commit to living the life that I've got now on the way to being who I want to be. And that's not to say that reaching self, like a better version of yourself isn't possible. Better in quotes, like the best version of yourself. But actually, a lot of psychological theory is there to tell us that really what we're striving towards above all else is self-acceptance. And to get to that self-acceptance, we really need to work on not being afraid of the parts of us which we perceive as flawed and which are frightening to us. And so that's why I encourage you to both, go and get a journal and write loving thoughts about the things which you perceive as being making it difficult to love yourself, and also towards thinking deliberate, positive thoughts like I am of value and I'm important and I matter and I am a me in this moment, and I'm so glad I did X, Y, or Z. And we're just giving yourself plenty of affirmation and self-acknowledgement. It's going to go a long way. Self-talk is key. So here are some questions that I would recommend you take to your journal. You can pause the video and jot them down and see what you find, and see if you can lavish yourself with some love. And if you have any questions, come back to me. I'm really happy to try and coach you into finding those thoughts that create feelings of unconditional love despite all of the disorganized, saucepan cupboard screaming parts of us. Thanks for your time, and I hope this has been helpful to you. And remember that this is a practice, and you might see that there's a long way to go, and that's okay. We can love the part of ourselves that doesn't love ourselves yet. Whoa, that was too meta. Lots of love. Bye-bye.